afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to get started because I've been told they're running a tight ship here. So we want to help them with their... My name is... I'm with UNEP, Deputy Director of Industry and Economy Division. At UNEP, I'm also wearing a hat which is the chair of the Page Management Board. Page is one of the co-organizers today, along with the Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action. So really excited about the event we're going to have today. We have a wonderful panel that's come from the four corners of the earth, and very, very pleased to have them with us. We're actually going to kick off with a keynote speech from Sam Mzungi, Dr. Sam. He is the co-chair of the Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action. He's from Uganda. They recently celebrated the 100th country joining the coalition at the IMF World Bank meetings just a month or two ago in Washington. So it's really interesting to see all the force that the coalition is taking going forward. I wanted to say a little bit about today, what we're hoping to achieve. We know we live in a very difficult world. It sometimes feels like it's getting more difficult because climate shocks are getting more intense. Nature shocks, we already know they're intense. And we also have this invisible one called pollution shocks, sometimes invisible, but it hits people all the same. It's a liability for human health, for productivity, and also for well-being. So it's this triple shock, but then on top of it, we have monetary and fiscal shocks as well, because all of these nature and climate, they spill over into the fiscal space. So the backdrop for today, yeah? Okay, this one? Okay, well, feels very powerful. The backdrop question is, how can you build prosperity by building resilience? So in other words, how can you avoid the cost of these shocks? This is really strong. Whoa, okay, not too close. How can you avoid the cost of future shocks by anticipating them and with your fiscal policy and with your financial and economic policy? And we'd also like to end with a think through on how this translates into sector work as well. Because in the real economy, it all happens, investments in mobility, in housing, in construction. So how does that happen? To kick us off, I'm going to hand over to Tim Scott. He's of the Page Management Board. He's going to give you some welcoming remarks on behalf of Page, as well as my own, and then we'll head straight into the keynote. Tim. Yep, that's good.
You hear me? Can you hear me in the back? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Stephen, Minister Mugume, Excellencies, colleagues, and ladies and gentlemen. I know you want to hear the words of Minister Mugume, so I'll be very brief, but let me just build on the wonderful opening remarks from Stephen, and on behalf of the Management Board of the Partnership for Action on Green Economy, it's a pleasure to welcome you to this dialogue on, it's got a long title, but it's about prosperity through resilience. For those of you that don't know, PAGE, the Partnership on Action for Action on Green Economy, is a UN flagship initiative comprising UNEP and UNDP, as well as UNIDO, UNITAR, and ILO. And we are very delighted to partner with you, Minister, and with the Coalition of Ministers of Finance for Climate Action on this event, but also on a broader set of activities, all designed to catalyze a just green transition. With the generous financial and technical support of PAGE funding partners, including Germany and the EU, as well as Sweden and Korea, and also in line with the PAGE 2030 strategy, we're collaborating not only with the coalition, but also with over 20 other countries to advance green finance, circularity, and green jobs, including Brazil and Indonesia, whom we're also very lucky to have with us today. So our conversation today aligns very closely, of course, with the overall theme of UNEA 7. And this is an opportunity to highlight both the work of the coalition and other PAGE partner countries who are leveraging public finance to strengthen competitiveness and drive circularity for the change that we need. Now, just before I give it back to you, Stephen, allow me to close by reiterating PAGE's commitment to our collaboration with the coalition and with all partners here today, and in our common efforts to recalibrate our economies for a greener, more inclusive, and prosperous future. This is our common vision. This is what brings us together in this room. It's also the vision that's been expressed so eloquently both by UNEP's Executive Director, Inger Anderson, as well as UNEP's new administrator, Alexander De Croo, both of whom will be speaking, of course, throughout this week here at UNES 7 and beyond. So with that, I look forward to listening and to learning from all of you, and I wish all of us a successful discussion.
Thank you so much, Tim. That was wonderful. And you've set the context further. And what I'd like to do actually, before inviting our keynote speaker here, is introduce the panel to you, because they've traveled far and wide to be with us today. So I'd like to start off by introducing Cristina Reis. She is the Vice Minister of Finance from Brazil. Cristina, please join us on the stage. I would like to invite Dr. Ilke Hirt from the Ministry of Environment in Germany to join us here on the stage. Please give her a round of applause. This is a good place. Yeah, we can move. Also, I would like to invite Mr. Eric Tegu Primantoro. He is the Senior Advisor of the Minister of Environment for International Cooperation and Diplomacy from Indonesia. Welcome, Eric. Thank you. Big round of applause. Last but not least, Dr. Sam Magumi from Uganda, Assistant Commissioner from the Ministry of Finance and co-chair of the Coalition for Finance Ministers. Sam, you have the floor.
Oh, it does. It's working. I thought I was going to be on this. Thank you so much, Stephen, because you saved my life and you saved my job. When I go back to Uganda, I will have a job. Because Tim, thank you so much for calling me Minister Sam. I know it's okay, but that's why I'm saying I represent Minister Honorable Kasaija Matias, who is the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development in Uganda. I represent him on the Coalition of Finance Ministers on Climate Action. So I sit for him. You're not very wrong, but you close. And I'm an Assistant Commissioner in Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development in Uganda. I sit in Macroeconomic Policy Department. I do macroeconomic modeling. I look at the numbers. So what we're going to speak about is at the center of what I do. I'm happy to be here with the great panelists, the panel that is here, for me to give an opening remark. An opening remark that is supposed to set the scene. But at the same time, it's supposed to talk about Okay. Thank you so much. I got size from my mother, big size, but the volume didn't come out. But I know this one. Now, this setting of the scene, I'm looking at fiscal policy as the engine of resilience, competitiveness, and sector transformation. Why resilience is sound, economics for Minister of Finance, and good investments against future shocks. I'll summarize it in very few minutes. And I have prepared something for you, to provoke you, to get, yes, because I will talk about things, some of them that people usually don't want to hear, and I will tell you what we need to do. First, Your Excellencies and the colleagues and friends, it's a pleasure to be with you on behalf of the Coalition of Finance Ministers on Climate Action. We're a coalition of 100 countries. Now we are 101. And we are finance ministries that come together to make sure we find our core actions, revenue collection, expenditure management, monetary and physical policies are geared towards climate action, to increase financial flows, to ensure there is adaptation, mitigation, and just transition. So we come together. And on behalf of the coalition, I'm happy to be here, but also at the same time, the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development of Uganda. Let me thank you, UNEP, Stephen, Paige in particular, and all the partners who have made this session possible. The title, apart from what I'm talking about, that has been chosen, Prosperity through Resilience, Sustainable Public Finance as the engine of circularity, competitiveness, and inclusive economic growth, is not just a slogan. For those of us in Ministry of Finance, it describes our daily reality. I told you where I see it. Macroeconomic policy, we're looking at numbers. So this is the reality we see every day. When a flood washes away a bridge, it happened recently in Uganda. For a family, it's human tragedy. We cannot go to the hospital. We cannot go to school. For a Minister of Finance, it's also a sudden hole in the budget, and unplanned reconstruction bill comes up. A bloat growth, economic growth, and revenues, you cannot get revenue. And sometimes another step towards debt distress. When soils are exhausted, when forests are degraded, when our cities are choking on pollution, this does not only show up in environmental reports, it shows up in our macro physical frameworks, in low productivity, in higher health costs, in social tensions, and in growing contingent bills. So my first message is simple. Resilience is not a nice-to-have environmental add-on. It is a sound macroeconomics for ministries of finance, planning, and economic development to take on. Climate change, nature loss, and pollution are now macro-critical issues. They shape inflation dynamics, long-term growth, physical space, and debt sustainability. If we fail to integrate them into our budgets, tax systems, public investment plans, and debt strategies, we are not being cautious. It's not just not being cautious, but we are underestimating risks. And we can no longer pretend that we don't know. The science is clear. There's a lot of disinformation. The economics is increasingly getting clear. We know that every shilling, every euro, every dollar, every Kenyan shilling invested in prevention and resilience, in robust infrastructure, in health ecosystems, in early warning systems, in social protection, saves multiple in emergency response and reconstruction. We've had studies of triple dividends, and we've seen a dollar invested can result into times 10 profits. We know that cleaner, more circular, more resource-efficient economies will be the ones that compete and attract investment in the decades ahead. So the real gap today is not a gap knowledge, it's a gap in implementation, governance, and political courage. For ministries of finance, political courage is not about big speeches. It's about the quiet, difficult decisions that rarely make headlines, but always make enemies. saying that we cannot afford subsidized pollution and vulnerability forever, and that harmful subsidies must be reformed. Choosing to invest ahead of shocks, even when there is pressure to spend everything on short-term demands. Protecting physical space for resilience and social protection, even when it would be easier to postpone those investments to the next governments and generations. So those are the things that, for us, that's courage, and we want it to happen. In Uganda, we see this very clearly. Every time we delay action, we pay for it later. With large disaster bills, more pressure on borrowing, more strains on vulnerable communities, every time we choose to invest in resilience, in climate-proof infrastructure, in sustainable land management, in systems that protect the poorest when crises hit, we create breathing room for growth, competitiveness, and opportunity. Across Africa, Europe, across every region, the story is the same. Avoiding different reforms today does not protect people. It simply shifts higher costs for them tomorrow. This is why the Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action is so important. It's not just another network. I told you what we do and why we're there as a coalition. It's a community of peers who are grappling with the same trade-offs, the same political constraints, the same fears of moving fast. That's all, Minister of Finance. We want to know where we're going. No minister wants to be alone in reforming fuel subsidies worldwide, alone in integrating climate and nature risks in debt management, alone in asking for different metrics of success at cabinet. Through the coalition, we can show our citizens, our parliamentarians, and market that this is not on ideology, it is the emerging room of prudent, forward-looking economic management. And we do not walk this path alone. Partners like UNEP, PAGE, and others, we do have partners we work with, and the governments are critical to turning political courage into practical action. UNEP helps us connect environmental science to physical reality, physical expenditure, and revenue, turning complex risk data into tools that budget departments, tax teams, and debt offices can actually use. PAGE brings together UN agencies to support countries in designing and implementing policies that are not only green, but also pro-growth, job-creating, and inclusive. They help us move from big concepts, resilience, circularity, competitiveness, to the detailed work of reforming public investment, rethinking subsidies and taxes. Let me bring this down to the level of a single decision. One, imagine a minister of finance who decides to gradually reform a costly fuel subsidy. On day one, this is politically risky. It's uncomfortable. It may be unpopular. But if he or she uses part of the savings to strengthen targeted cash transfers to the poorest households, and another part to invest in resilient infrastructure, clean transport, and energy efficiency, then three things happen. One, the budget becomes more sustainable. Households are better protected when prices spike or disasters strike. The economy becomes more competitive in the world and more resilient. And that's what prosperity through resilience looks like in practice. Later in this session, we'll briefly introduce a short chair action note. from the coalition and page that sketches how we can carry this agenda forward to the Financing for Development Conference and beyond. But for now, I want to focus less on the paper and more on the spirit behind it and other conferences, including, That spirit is in this, that ministers of finance are central actors in the transition to resilient, circular, competitive economies, not spectators, that we have enough evidence to act, and that delay is itself a choice with real cost. That by standing together through the coalition with support from UNEP page and many others, we can share not only good practice, but also political cover. Let me close now. It's been a long opening remark with personal appeal. This is really my personal appeal to you. We're all working under intense pressure, high debt, rising social demands, geopolitical uncertainty, and citizens who are tired of promises. We are tired. It is tempting to push resilience, climate, and nature issues to the margins because you want short-term gains. But the storms, the droughts, the fires, the crop failures, the heat waves, the failure by Kenya to get rain in the last 1 month, they are not waiting for the next fiscal year. They are already rewriting our budget lines and our debt projections. So if there's one thing I ask of you today, it's this. Let us not be the generation of finance ministers. Let us not be the generation of scientists. Let us not be the generation of United Nations experts and workers. Let us not be not the generation of presidents, not the generation of ministers who had the data, who had the scientists and the economists, and still chose to look the other side. Let us instead be the generation that use the tools and the science and the knowledge that we have to build the economies that are both competitive and fair, and that the next generation will be better. Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action is here to help us do that. UNEP, page, and other partners are here to help us do that. I'm saying us, including everybody, UNEP, everybody. We have a part to do. But in the end, the critical ingredient is your political courage. To my fellow developing countries, the resources are available. We should not wait for anybody to give us the resources. We should use our resources effectively. Then other people can get their responsibility to come and add on. That's very unpopular sometimes, but I always tell people, that's always my message. How do you use your domestic finance? I sit in Minister of Finance. I know if you're talking about adaptation and resilience, this is your main objective. If it truly matters for our shared future, it must show up in our budgets, in our physical frameworks, and in our investment choices. Today, not 10 years after. I want to thank you for listening to these long, long remarks, and I hope the panelists will allow me accept that at least I touched whatever you're going to say. I want to thank you very much for listening to me, and please thank you for giving me the chance.
Thank you so much, Sam, for those opening remarks. And you've really traced a pathway forward that looks at the current reality and says, it is tough, there are tough decisions, but we're going to have to make them, and we're going to have to live with them. And that's what I'm hearing from you. And our panelists today actually are some very seasoned policymakers who are on the front lines as well. I would like to invite actually Cristina first, Dr. Cristina Reis. She's from the Ministry of Finance in Brazil. She has worked on the ecological transition plan of Brazil, one of the signature policies of Lula, President Lula. And I would also like to say that, Cristina, you've also been recently nominated the Carbon Market Czar for Brazil. So we're just so pleased to have you with us today to hear more about the Brazil experience. Over to you.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes. Now, actually, it's my pleasure to be here. I'm very happy to be in Kenya. That's my first time here. So, hello, Mambo. It's very nice. Hello, Assad. My dear friend is just arriving, and I want to thank Paige for organizing this session, for inviting us, the Ministry of Finance of Brazil, to be part of this and to talk about our experience. We have been participating on the coalition of finance ministers for climate action for a while, and also we are leading the regional coalition of finance ministers for climate change as well in Latin America. Just recently, we were nominated the president of this regional coalition. And I'm very glad to say that in this government, since 2023, the Brazilian Ministry of Finance is really taking care and looking very seriously into not only the environmental and climate agenda, but also sustainable development agenda with the so-called ecological transformation plan. And I need to emphasize that we are using the word transformation instead of transition, because in Brazil and in many developing countries, not only a matter of resilience against climate change or changing our energy matrix, but it's about transforming the whole economy to avoid historical and very deep social and economic challenges or problems that our economics presents. So Brazil is one of the most uneven countries of the world, and Latin America is the most uneven region of the world. And this is related to the kind of jobs that we generate. This is related to a technological and financial dependency, and this is related to a vulnerable macroeconomic regime as well. So in order to change the game, we need to reconcile the macroeconomic regime with the sustainable development policies, with the trade and investment policies, innovation technology and science policies, and so forth. So the idea of the ecological transformation plan is very simple. The Ministry of Finance has to make funding, financial policies, regulatory policies, tax and fiscal policies, and also some monitoring and administration policies anyway. So the idea is to make them in coherence with this sustainable development vision, right? What we want as a country, as a society. And so President Lula was elected to promote decent jobs, to improve the productivity of the economic activities, to reduce social inequalities, and by inequalities, I mean all kinds of inequalities, gender inequalities, race, ethnic or racial inequalities, regional inequalities as well, and also to protect, to conserve, to maintain, to regenerate the environment, and then to fight climate change together with the whole planet and many countries. So Brazil was the president of the G20 last year, now is the president of COP30, of BRICS, and of Mercosur, and we are taking advantage of this task to also bring coherence between the domestic agenda and the international agenda. So the ecological transformation plan has 6 pillars. They are related to the sectors that commonly we measure emissions, so bioeconomy and agri-food systems related to AFOLU, energy transition, circular economy, infrastructure for adaptation, technological density for manufacturing sectors, and sustainable finance, which are the kind of instruments that the Ministry of Finance is more directly influencing. So after 2 years of the plan, we have made lots of progress. There were 3 issuance of the sovereign sustainable bonds, which brought more than $4 billion to the economy that were invested in the climate fund, which have better financial funding conditions for the productive sector to decarbonize. There is the Eco-Invest program that brought additional around $15 to $20 billion to new sectors, to startups, to bioeconomy, to the Amazon. The Eco-Invest are really a very innovative instrument that hedges the foreign exchange volatility. We also have the Brazilian Sustainable Taxonomy, which I had the pleasure to coordinate with the support of UNEP and the German cooperation, GATEZ, and we have launched it 2 months ago, and now we are starting to implement this. So there is a decree that says that the taxonomy should be used in all kinds of MRV of the public administration, companies and institutions, for financial labeling, for insurances, for tax and fiscal incentives, and so forth. So today, it was published a decree that says that the public procurement in Brazil should follow the taxonomy. This is a huge achievement. It's voluntary. And progressively, we are changing all these norms related to the way that we define the sustainable activities. And as you can note, I don't say green activities, I say always sustainable, because by sustainability, as you know, related to the SDG agenda, we mean the social, environment, and economic matters. So we also have a huge agenda in the parliament. We had approved some laws related to biofuels, to wind offshore energy, and to the compliance carbon market. So now I'm leading this extraordinary secretariat at the Ministry of Finance in charge for implementing the compliance carbon market in Brazil. And within 5 years, it will be fully operating. And this is a very big challenge that we have ahead. And in accordance to those policies, our international agenda are pushing similar things, such as the Open Coalition for Compliance Carbon Markets, what we call the super taxonomy, which are the principles for taxonomy interoperability, which were published now and launched in during COP Belém, as well as its website, and the Taxonomy Global Mapper, also led by GATEZ, and many other institutions, UNEP, UNDP, the Sustainable Finance Network, and so forth. So these are the general policies, but in order to make them, we need analytical tools. We need those very good and precise economic modeling tools, and our approach at the Ministry of Finance, at the Secretariat of Economic Policy, where I was working before, is to have a variety of macroclimate modeling. Variety in terms of methodologies, of scope, of sectors that are being studied. And by the way, we had a very nice study with Page, UNEP, that together with the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, Professor Fábio Freitas, Professor Ítalo Pedrosa, who have modeled the ecological transformation plan, and they have very nice results. I will just mention, and then I finish because we have a debate here. But it's a demand-led modeling, and this is also a kind of innovation. We have to have different approach, supply-led or demand-led, dynamic or not dynamic. And this model had 9 scenarios, and the scenarios that admitted the ecological transformations policies have shown that it can increase the GDP growth by 0.8 percentage points by 2035. The income per capita can rise, I can't see, 5% points in 2050. The ETP policies can generate 2 million jobs until 2035 across all sectors, but notably biofuel sectors are very relevant for the Brazilian productive structure. The inequality will not become worse and can reduce in some scenarios. The emissions can reduce, can make Brazil near to net zero by 2050, as our NDC says. And there is an index to measure biodiversity called habitat quality that also increases up to 7.1 percentage points by 2050. So these are results that we can estimate for the medium to the long term. But in practice, we are already seeing a very good macroeconomic dynamics in Brazil, differently from the expectations. The GDP growth is higher than expected. It's already the best GDP growth in many decades in Brazil. The employment rate is the best ever, at least of the series, the statistics series. The increase in income is also the best. The Gini index is also the best. The poverty reduction was amazing. And Brazil is not anymore in the hunger map of FAO. So we were out of the list by 2014, then we entered in the list again, and now we are very proud to say that in Brazil we are not anymore in the hunger map, and this is a great achievement because, as I was saying, our priority is to fight misery, to fight all sources of poverty, and to improve the living standards. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Christina, for sharing that. I mean, it's really impressive how you've attacked the equity issue at the same time as you're going after growth and sustainability. So it's sort of this triple front that you're working on and showing that it's theoretically possible and it's realistically possible. It's very, very impressive. And you mentioned also a couple of very concrete policy measures. You mentioned the taxonomy, but also the taxonomy being adopted in terms of procurement, sustainable public procurement. And I'd like to turn to you, Ilka, for a moment on the policy measures in Germany as well. Because I know that Germany has been working on the transition, the energy transition, for a very long time, but not just the energy transition. But Christina, did you want to come back in?
I just forgot to say that the inflation target, the inflation index are well controlled, and also the debt. So, because this is important to make this coherence. Sorry.
Absolutely, those are fundamental economic targets as well. Absolutely. But thank you so much. Over to you.
Thanks, Stephen. And it's really hard to speak right after you, Christina. I must admit, or I must say that Brazil is absolutely leading here with that idea of President Lula to really have, I mean, the national ecological transition plan placed in the finance ministry and not in the environment ministry. This was really revolutionary. I mean, we've been working a lot with Brazil throughout these last years of the Lula presidency, and this example was one that we really had a look at, and we had many discussions with your finance ministry, with your ministry, with your minister, because we admire this. We admire, because, I mean, it does take a lot of courage also, and it's not so easy to like shift this issue from environment ministries to finance ministries, where it actually belongs, because then you have the strength to really get all the sectors and everybody on board. So congratulations on this. I really feel sort of, maybe I should have spoken first, because we're not there yet in Germany, even though we've been working very hard all these last years, but this integrative approach is just amazing, and I wish you all the best for, like, I mean, I know you moved on, but for this plan to like be continued and to work out, it's just really great. So I wanted to start off with this, and yes, again. And turning to Germany, I must say, so like I would say the atmosphere in Germany right now is not as positive as it is in Brazil. We've had 3 years of economic stagnation, and that's when sort of like the economy, but also the people start sort of panicking a little bit. And this always means that environmental policies have to prove that they are a basis for resilient economies, that they help have a stable economy. So that's the place where we're in right now. We have to prove ourselves again. I mean, we as Environment Ministry, and I think the community here knows that this is a fact, and that it's not only environmentalists who say that, but every time we get into a harder period, like a harder economic period in Germany, we have to like prove this again, make the argument again. Luckily, we have been working a lot these last years on policy measures, sectoral, but also cross-sectoral, and I'll name some of them. I have to use my notes for that, because all these English words of our strategies are not so easy to say. So what we have, first of all, is, of course, and this is in the responsibility of the Environment and Climate Ministry, so the ministry that I'm working in, the German Federal Climate Action Act, that is a legally binding framework for making markets climate friendly and circular. And it also includes a provision for incorporating, it's getting louder here, climate goals into our federal budgetary decisions, particularly for investments and procurement. So I would say this is quite an important lever. Then in the field of circularity, we're quite proud, because we still managed to like get this through right at the end of our last legislative period. We have the German National Circular Economy Strategy. This one is focusing on principles of circular rather than linear public procurement, as well as circular products and production processes. And we do showcase here that by reducing and recycling primary raw materials, the German economy actually becomes less dependent on imports and can strengthen its resilience and also incentivize green businesses. I know you don't say green, sustainable businesses and local job creation. So this serves as my second example. What we also have is our national adaptation strategy. This one promotes transparency and consistent monitoring through actually measurable targets and indicators, and they allow tracking progress and also adjusting policy levers, which incentivizes private investments, because we do reduce risk and increase our predictability. So maybe these three very sectoral examples. Nevertheless, we also work with our finance ministry, and it's not always so easy to work with finance ministries because everybody wants to be friends with finance ministries, and so we tend to like run after the finance ministry, and the finance ministry saying, no, I don't have any money to give to you. But that's not the point of it. I mean, we did catch them on this because we actually could show them that that our policies lead to financial stability as well. And so what we do have is also a national sustainable finance strategy. And with that one, we aim to develop reliable and comprehensive policy frameworks that integrate sustainability into the financial decision-making processes. Last but not least, we we established some cross-sectoral coordination measures or instruments, maybe I would say, together with the finance ministry, and we established the Sustainable Finance Advisory Council. This is why I have to look into my notes, all these nice words that are very long, and it's quite a strong multi-stakeholder committee that brings together experts in the field from the financial sector, but also private sector, civil sector, and academia. This sector, it's working quite well, and they have presented a report to us last year on the role of biodiversity and climate resilience in financial market stability, and also presented some very concrete solutions and measures that we can take. So what we absolutely realized, and we all here know it, is that environment and finance ministries and policies have to work hand in hand. But I mean, I feel very humbled by what you really already put in place, and I hope that one day we can also get there in Germany. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ilke, for sharing those very concrete examples. Interesting to see expenditure, public procurement being on, both from Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Environment, and also on the finance, creating this sort of cross-sectoral platforms to bring in different points of view. I think that's a really interesting segue, Eric, to the Indonesia example that you were telling me about earlier today. With your experience to drive sustainable finance forward as part of your growth strategy for Indonesia, and of course you've worked closely with Bappenas. I think Paige also worked very closely with Bappenas through UNDP, but really interesting to have your thoughts as well about working across ministries, working across different fields to get progress.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, it's been a pleasure for me to join this prestige event, with the UNEP and all the distinguished speaker. First, I think we have very strong legal basis regarding the environmental and also sustainable finance. First, we have the law number 32, 2009 regarding Environmental Protection and Management Acts. This is very environmental aspect, but this law contains at least 3 big clusters. The first one is about the command and control. Command and control, but not only command and control, but also integrated with what we call the environmental compensation. The second one is about the voluntary mechanism. And the third one is about the financial aspect issue. And there is some provision in this law regarding addressing about the instrument for environmental economics. And then about the green budgeting, it's very clear state, explicit state in our Environmental Protection Management Acts. And then, based on this law, we try to develop the implementing regulation, government regulation, and also the many ministerial regulation to implement about the instrument for environmental economic. We have the government regulation number 6/2007 regarding the instrument for economic instrument for environmental economic. At least there are at least there are 17 instruments divided into 3 clusters. The first cluster is regarding how about the national plan. It means how to use the instrument economic for the national plan. The second one is about what we call the environmental fund. The third one is about the incentive. Regarding the the instrument for national development, we try to introduce what we call the green GDP. We try to make some pilot project, how to conduct this green GDP. It means by we have the brown GDP and the green GDP. But the challenge right now, because we apply the green GDP, it means the growth is a little bit lower. It's not popular in the politics, something like that. As long as all the country, all the region apply the green economy is good. But if there's no, it's the big challenge because it's not political popular, something like that, in terms of the growth, something like that. And then regarding the environmental fund, we have established what we call the Indonesian Environmental Fund. This is under the Ministry of Finance. They try to develop what we call something like the climate financing, biodiversity finance, something like that. There is some windows for the climate, working with the international donor, with the private sector, with the private company, and also with the German. We have the support from the KfW, circular economy. Using that, we try to develop under the Indonesian Environmental Fund and set up the windows for circularity economy. For revolving fund, it means that we try to encourage the people, local community, how to get an access for the money, something like that. But they have to pay back with the low rate, something like that. This is what we call the Indonesian Environmental Fund. And regarding the incentive, the third cluster, we have the sociable finance also. We work with the Indonesian Financial Service Authority, something like the Federal Reserve, something like that. We right now in the second phase, the roadmap in the second phase. I was a part of the facilitator to drive how to integrate environmental risk and impact into the financial decision making in the banking process also. We learn from the UNEP FE, some of the ESG, something like that. We develop something like that, and there's so many regulation and guideline developed under the sustainable finance, how to integrate the environmental consideration when the bank manager, the account executive of the bank assess the credit, something like that. This is what we call we already, and we try to integrate it also with we have the program, what we call the environmental performance of the business activities. We integrate with the banking mechanism system, something like that. Okay, this is the part. Okay, and also the green procurement also. Okay, we have the regulation, the detailed guideline, working with the procurement agency, something like that, under the NADA minister, something like that. And also regarding the compensation also, we also develop what we call the environmental compensation. If there is some damage for the environment or environmental pollution, something like that, there is some we try to make the monetary analysis, something like the economic valuation, something like that, to in order for the court to find something like that. So there are many aspects. At least we have the strong legal basis. We have the infrastructure. We try to develop what we call and apart from that, under the Ministry of Finance, we also developed something like the financial institution like the World Bank or IDB, but at the national level. We try to finance infrastructure project, but we use the ESMF from the international standard like the IFC or World Bank standard. Environmental social safeguard as one of the requirement to get the finance from this is under the Ministry of Finance also.
Interesting.
Okay, that's the overview of the regulation integrating with the finance with the environmental aspect. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Eric. It's very interesting to hear this conversation unfold because basically what I hear are two pioneers from ministries of environment that are, going over to Ministry of Finance and making the case. What is the case that the environment is material, and not only material, but maybe an opportunity, right? An opportunity, a market opportunity, a growth opportunity, a resilience opportunity, even a jobs opportunity eventually. I heard you talk about the domestic markets, Ilka. And so that's a really interesting meeting point between these two ministries with their very different portfolios. Sam, I want to come back to you. You've given us a brilliant keynote speech. I know you also wear a hat as the Ministry of Finance in Uganda. So I'd like to come back to you for a moment just with your Uganda hat on and say, if you were to talk about circularity and resilience, what are the arguments that you would use to your minister to say, hey, this might be something that can push us along our growth path, our prosperity path? What would be the elements, that you would be looking at there?
Thank you so much, Stephen, and the panelists, really great. And looking at ministries, environment, and finance, this side and that side. There are a number of things, and I will give you an example of what we've done in Uganda. Because for us, Minister of Finance, more of the numbers that speak, the jobs being created, the GDP points you're going to add on if you invest in something, circular economy, what revenues are you going to bring in, what is expenditure, what do we expect the government to put in terms of enablers. So those are things we're going to look at. And eventually now, that has come up is to look at the long-term impact in terms of what you lose if you do the quick things, So that will define us where we invest in industries and circular economy. The example I wanted to give is our relationship again with Minister of Water and Environment. Recently, we got Minister of Environment asking us as Minister of Finance, if we invest in natural capital, what are the gains? How can I do this to get, financing and to be supported in the budget? And we did it. We modeled, worked with them. We did a simple model that looked at investment in. We looked at forest cover. Wanted to look at wetlands and the water. We failed because the channels in wetlands and the water are difficult. But forest, if you invest in extension in terms of extension and quality of forest, and we realized a number of things. We realized the increase in jobs, like you talk, with GDP growth, and we shocked with little money. It's around we used 10 billion Uganda shillings, which is little, small money, and we could see results after. But those are things that we would look at to invest in future circular economy. Is it going to reduce imports? What about exports? The balance of payments, what is going to happen to this? And definitely it will go down. Employment, reduction in terms of the amount of money I'm putting into waste management, and then the reduction in pollution. So these are critical things that you cannot understand unless you have the tools that you can be the macroeconomic tools that have climate change parameters that you can use. Luckily in Uganda, what we did, we extended our social accounting matrix and we put in the pollution parameters. We have a matrix on pollution, energy use, and water. We're lucky because we had done the natural capital accounts and the pattern as well back came in and supported us. This is a big thing that's helping us do that. But if I go to what we do at the coalition, we did a survey from our countries who have the tools. We found more than 2/3 didn't have the tools, didn't have the capacity, didn't have to know. So we still have a lot to do as ministries of finance to understand more and to be able to direct investments in circular economy, in blue economy, in the more resilient economies. I want to thank you.
Thank you so much, Sam. So it's interesting, we're speaking someone from a Ministry of Finance who actually understands the numbers and has worked with the numbers before. But Christina, I wanted to come back to you briefly before opening it to the floor as well, because what we heard from Ilke is, maybe there's a lot of, getting a lot of, I don't know if it's this one. But what helps you make the case inside of a Ministry of Finance? When you work with other ministries, whether it's Ministry of Environment or one of the line ministries, agriculture, infrastructure, what are the things that you look for to actually enable you to do your job to help those decisions get made?
Yeah, thank you for this question, and thank you all for the speech. It's a privilege to be here having this debate. I would say that in order to have this coordination among the ministries and also with the private sector, we really need to design a very nice governance, right? So in the first year of President Lula's third term, we spent many months building up the governance that were destroyed in Bolsonaro's government. So, for instance, the ODS committee, the SDG committee was interrupted. The climate change committee was canceled, and many others. We had to establish, and then someone have measured this, we established among 600 decrees of committees, councils, working groups to do the industrial policy, the climate policy, the mitigation adaptation policies, the energy transition policies, the command and control policies, and the construction policies as well. And so there are many committees, and we interact through the committees. And regarding the ecological transformation plan, we have specific committees for the individual policies. So the sustainable bonds have its own committee. The taxonomy has a huge committee with 350 people. The compliance carbon market has a committee, and today we published a decree regarding the participation of the private sector, and most of those policies have the participation of civil society. And this is very, very important. I think that the taxonomy is our showcase. We have the superior committee that take the decisions, that we have a executive committee to really make the timeline work to bring cohesion through the working groups, and we have 10 working groups, sectorial working groups, MIV working group, inequalities working group, and a participative and consultancy technical committee with the civil society there. It's a lot of work, you can imagine. To build the dialogue between these people, we have the representatives of the national farmers and the representatives of the national banks. We have the representative of the agribusiness sector and the representatives of the industry sector. So it's easy to fight, yes. We fight a lot, but in the end, we could really find this consensus and the right balance when everybody's a little bit upset. But we have finally a balance, and people that have participated through this process know how difficult it is to get those dialogues. We have dialogue on the parameters, on the safeguards, on the adaptation criteria, and we have revised together the public consultation of the policy. We had 4 months of public consultation with 5,000 contributions to the Brazilian sustainable taxonomy. And although it's a lot of work, it's where we spend more time doing this governance, it's worth it because it brings legitimacy. It's really a participative and transparent process. And then the policies is well desired by all the sectors and the stakeholders that are involved. And then it is more likely that it's going to be implemented and successful. Let's see, within 1 to 2 or 3 years. But this is the kind of work that we have to do. Of course, we are closer to the Ministry of Environment. Minister Fernando Haddad and Minister Marina Silva are always dialoguing. And it's, I think, the first time that the Ministry of Finance really took the environmental agenda seriously, and we really had the chance to implement the ecological transformation plan together with the Ministry of Environment, the other ministries, the whole government is engaged. And not only the government, that's my main message, the civil society as well.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I mean, it's very interesting. It sounds like a journey that you're on, and you invite people with you on that journey, the private sectors, the investors, the different sector specialists as well. We want to come back to that because at the end, for UNEP, the sector investment is really where the real economy happens, jobs happen, and getting a lot of feedback. But that's where the action actually happens, and so that's an area where we really want to look at further. Colleagues, this is a chance to ask any questions that you might have that are burning. We'll take 2 or 3. I'd like you to say who you are, and then we'll have a chance to come back to the panel for sort of reflections. I'm abrogating the second round in case you didn't notice because of time. But so let's see, we've got 3. We've got 1 here, and 1 here. And please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Stephen. If you would turn yours off, maybe. Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much, Stephen, and thank you, Your Excellencies. This was a fantastic panel. If you don't mind, I have a quick 2-part question. I'm Jo Puri. I'm the Director of Policy and Programs at UNEP. So my first question is related to adaptation financing. Sam, in your very good keynote, you spoke about resilience, and a large part of that is to do with adaptation financing. But I was wondering whether, from the perspective of your ministries and your departments, you could talk a little bit about how that is tagged in your budgets, and Sam, that's for you as well, because we know that mitigation is far more easily tagged, and we've got the MDB methodology, the Rio methodology, but less so for adaptation. So that's one. And the second one is, I don't know if you saw over the weekend, there was a big paper that was retracted in Nature. So this is on the Network for Greening the Financial System. It's based on a central bank damage function methodology that looked at global GDP. And that initially said that global GDP would reduce by 60% if countries went on their current trajectory, but because the data could not be replicated, that estimate was reduced by 1/3, so by 2/3, right? And I don't know whether, several of you mentioned modeling methods, but I was wondering whether this and other sort of challenges with modeling have an impact on the way finance ministries look at the impact of climate on financing and budgeting. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jo. And I'm reminded of Nick Stern's comment, beware the tail. We do not know about the tail.
Thank you, everyone on the panel. It's super interesting. My name is Luke Hatton. I'm the co-focal point for sustainable finance at the Children and Youth Major Group to UNEP. I'm also a PhD researcher at Imperial College London. I wanted to ask about some of the challenges involved with navigating ministries of finance and their role in addressing climate and nature challenges. We have a thing called Treasury Brain in the UK, which is an idea that there's a focus on short-term fiscal constraints that lead to reduced funding for the investment required to meet climate development goals. So my question to the panel is, how can we navigate this? And wearing my CYMG hat, how can youth voices better be integrated into these decisions? Because ministries of finance are often seen as black boxes. It's hard to engage with as a youth because you don't necessarily have the technical capacity to, and it's not clear often where the routes for engagement are. A question as well for following up on that in terms of the Sustainable Finance Advisory Council and the committees in Brazil. Was there youth involved in those? And yeah, thank you.
Hello, my name is Oksana, and I am the facilitator of major groups and stakeholders for Europe. And actually, 2 last days, we were discussing many impacts from armed conflicts on the state of environment and economies. And since we have right now 3 ongoing conflicts in Somalia, in Palestine, and in Ukraine, my question would be the following. Would you support the request delivered by the European representatives of MGSF to UNEP about a need to develop integrated guidance for assessment of environmental damage due to the armed conflicts. We see that UNEP engagement would provide required legitimacy, as Brazilian representative said, to such guidance. And related to that question, feasibility for use debt for nature swap mechanism for such countries. Such mechanism was successfully applied in Poland in 90s. Do you consider feasibility for such mechanism? Thank you very much.
So really interesting sort of debt swap question and also armed conflict, environmental policy.
So last question. My name is Inga Wagner. I work for the Ministry for the Environment and Climate Action in Berlin, in the ministry with Ilka. And in Germany, a reform of national procurement law is going on with the aim to strengthen sustainability in public procurement and make it more binding. And I heard that you from Indonesia mentioned guidelines for green procurement, I guess, and you mentioned us as well from Brazil. And my questions would be, is it only for the Ministry of Finance or for the whole government, so guiding the whole government? Are there any binding elements, and were there any difficulties you faced when you're working on these guidelines? Thank you.
Thank you so much. So drilling down on the sustainable procurement aspect as well. So what I'd like to do is perhaps we start here, Eric, and you could kick it off. You've had a series of questions all the way from the integrity of modeling and all the way to youth and the time dimension. And we'll work our way across. Sam, you'll have the last word, and then we have closing remarks by our director, Sheila Agarwal-Khan, who's just joined us here in the front row.
Okay. First, I would like to maybe. I'd like to maybe answer. I'd like to answer some question maybe that I can respond here. The first thing is adaptation finance and resilience, something like that. Like I said before, yeah, we have what we call the government regulation number 46 2007, yeah, regarding the instrument for economic for the environmental economics. One of the instrument is the environmental insurance. We try to something like to develop the insurance for the local farmer related to the climate vulnerability, something like that. Okay, this is something like we try to develop something like that, even though it's not running well, yeah, but it's something that we can develop something like that. Okay, this is about the resilience and also the adaptation finance also. And taking in the budget, I think, yeah, because it's one of the because right now we try to under the law, yeah, we try to develop the green budgeting also. So there is some budgeting for the several activities, yeah, the mitigation and other the adaptation also, because we have a lot of program regarding the adaptation measure, yeah, like the plantation, restoration, and rehabilitation of forest, something like that is similar to the adaptation also, and also regarding the health related to the climate risk also. And the climate model and also the budgeting also. There is some interesting aspect, yeah. When we try to finance the infrastructure, the big project, yeah, and especially I think all the infrastructure should take the EIA, environmental impact assessment. But right now there's a lot of guidance, yeah, a lot of the lesson learned, something like that, a lot of reference, yeah, how to integrate the climate prediction into the EIA, something like that, in order to reduce the risk for the financial mechanism, something like that. There's some best experience, because I have background in EIA, the hydropower, something like that, the road construction, the bridge, yeah, how to deal with the climate extreme, something like that. Yeah, this is kind of should be taken into account the EI in order to prevent something like the loss of the infrastructure, yeah, because of the climate impact, something like that. It could be something like that on the practical, but I don't know how to modeling with something like the national budget, something like that. But on the practical infrastructure project, we can use something like that, the how to integrate the climate aspect, yeah, issue, modeling something like that into the EI in order to develop the sustainable infrastructure, something like that.
That's actually a really very concrete. I mean, you don't need to model that far out into the future to understand the impacts of climate today. Sam was also talking about that impact. So we just have to be very brief, Eric,
Okay.
as we...
And then about the procurement law, yeah, this applies to all the institutions in Indonesia, for all the government, the national, and also the local also. This apply to we have the guideline, we have the institution that dealing with the what we call the procurement agency. They develop the guideline, not us, but they apply all the regulation. But I forget the name of the ministry regulation, yeah. But I will search, yeah, about the regulation. Maybe you can learn about the procurement in Indonesia too. Thank you.
So on adaptation, yeah, there is the National Plan for Adaptation, and it has the financial and funding and regulatory instruments as well. But your question was on whether we are tagging adaptation expenses, and the Ministry of Planning and Budget has just established a methodology for this related to IDB methodology. As you say, the MDBs have many initiatives. But what I would like to say is that the important task in every time that we bring some kind of standard or methodologies into a country is the need to really look into local conditions and local specificities, so that we cannot copy and paste thresholds and parameters. So it's very important to look at the priorities at each country. Regarding public procurement, so the Ministry of Innovation and Management is leading this national strategy, and it's very innovative. It's for sustainability in general. The taxonomy is one of the instruments. There'll be an action plan, and this is also something that they have presented in COP30. They are working with other countries to develop an international network of public procurement, sustainable public procurement. So I think that I can later give you more information on this. Regarding sustainable finance, the difficulties that we have, so there are so many, but many of them are related to the amendments in the Congress and to the classic conflicts related to distribution, so in general. And so what I can say that in our case, before performing the ecological transformation plan, its tools, programs, and actions, the Ministry of Finance has led a new fiscal regime framework, which changed the way, the law for increasing the public spending. And the most importantly is the tax reform. First, we had the consumption tax reform after 3 decades waiting for a value-added tax into products. So we finally could do this, and was also another big dispute, but in the end, we were successful as a society. And now, we had just passed the income tax reform. So the Congress has exempted last week or 2 weeks ago every person that earns 5,000 reais, $1,000 per month of paying taxes. So this is a huge redistributive policy, and as you know, one of our main ambition is also taxing the super rich. So we need those kind of initiatives in order to have budget and conditions to implement other sustainable policies. And to finalize, we are, I can say in my name, we are all against any kind of wars and of violence. My personal position is against the war in Palestine and in Ukraine and everywhere. We really need to look seriously into how the countries are putting more money and investing more in war than in other things. And it's not only about international wars, but also the way that we protect our citizens. So in Brazil, the criminality rate is very high. There are many kinds of violence. And yesterday, we had huge protests in the entire country. Many women went to the streets against the feminicide cases, which are tremendous. In Brazil, there were 1,000 murders this year of women. And so the whole society is committed to fight this kind of violence, and we need to talk about it. And we all, men and women, need to be against those kind of violences and wars. And we need to talk about this in every story. So thank you in every forum. So thank you very much for your question.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you. Ilke, as you bringing your concluding remarks, I also want to bring us back to the topic of the day where we started out, which was resilience and shocks, and how we make our economies and our societies more resilient going into the future. So as you heard on the adaptation finance question, the intergenerational question, the conflict question, also just your thoughts also about, how do we create that resilience?
Well, actually, I also wanted to answer to one of the questions. I'm sorry that I don't completely obey to your, but I wanted to also answer to your question about the damages, the economic damages and environmental damages and the assessment of those in war zones. Also, because I can link this to intergenerational questions. In Germany, of course, we have a war very close to our door, I would say, but as well as Christina, obviously we are also against every war happening in the world, and I mean, you cannot compare wars to each other. It's always horrible. Young people are dying and the environment is being destroyed. So much money is just thrown out of the window. But of course, since it's so close to our front door, the war in Ukraine is really a lot on our minds in Germany, and it shifted our whole discussion from it changed a lot, of course, also what the young generation cares about nowadays. Because some years ago, climate protection, environmental protection was like on top of the agenda. The young people pushed us. They went to the streets. They pushed us to do more, to put more money into these policies. And nowadays, of course, they still care. We've had some studies about this, but also they do have other sorrows on their minds. They are afraid of this war reaching out. They are afraid of having to fight in wars, and we haven't had that for like decades in Germany, this fear. Right now, we are reinstalling, it's voluntary for the moment, but it might get mandatory in military service. We haven't had the need to have that in the past decade. And so this also answers the question, where does money go? Right now we're investing a lot in weapons and in military, infrastructure. But we also make sure as the German government that these infrastructure measures also go into climate finance, by the way. So this is still, it's not like we don't care about this anymore, but it has gotten more difficult right now. And so to your question, do we support this assessment of environmental damages and how much money actually this costs? Yes, we do support it. On the other hand, I also think what is also important is to look into the future and to see, okay, we have to rebuild those places that were destroyed by war, and there will be investments flowing into these countries, into Ukraine, into the other parts where wars will hopefully end soon. And then we have to think about how do we rebuild these countries? And it's important to have a sustainable, a green recovery, not just to like make the same mistakes we made decades ago, build something that is not sustainable. And in the example of Ukraine, we also have very concrete, actually we have concrete requirements because we want Ukraine to become part of the EU. And in order to be able to become member of the EU, you have to, to get to the acquis communautaire. So we have some very specific measures that in the environmental protection field that you have to implement. And that's a good thing because this gives us a lever to have investment flows sort of directed into the right directions. We've set up a project with UNEP actually and UNECE. It's the Green Recovery Platform in Ukraine, yes, and working with Ukraine on that exactly to like make sure that these financial flows go into the right directions. So this is something we also want to put a focus on, and that would be it. I know we're running short on time,
okay.
I want to leave place for Sam as well.
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Ilke. And absolutely, I mean, the transformations that we're talking about today, whether they're from conflict to post-conflict, or whether they're from linear to circular, or whether they're from traditional to something future state, I feel like this is a challenge, and as you know, we were talking in the beginning, it's gotten harder. It's gotten more difficult because the economies are not growing as fast in some cases, or because there's other pressures. I'd like to, Sam, give you the last word of the panel, but also give you a space to speak to the co-chair's action note as well, some of the elements that you'll be launching today as part of this, and then we will come to our final speaker, which will be Sheila Agarwal-Khan, who will close the session. Sam, over to you.
Just a request. Let me answer 2 questions. I'll leave the other one to you. They're very good questions.
Nobody's obeying me anymore, so.
There was a question on budget tagging and the adaptation. I totally agree with you. Adaptation is harder than mitigation. I'll give you an example in Uganda, what we're doing. We started budget tagging and we're looking at this money, but we stop at objective and outcome level. It's harder to come to outputs and because of the numbers. And we are trying, so it's a working process. When it comes to models, I like the question, do we, Ministers of Finance, not getting engaged more because of the models themselves don't tell? Models take in what you put in. Models are as good as the relationship you give to the economic theory and how you relate it to them. So definitely, a good model will give you good results and good estimates. And we do have now a practice of models globally. We're meeting almost every year, June, under the Coalition of Finance Ministers of Climate Action, HP4, and we discuss the different modeling tools that we have, their advantages and their disadvantages, and the numbers they give. But what we have now, all of us, most of the models we have is, if you invest in adaptation, if you invest in climate change action, you're going to get better results. And the model is a picture. It will never give you an exact thing, but it's a picture. It takes you to where you should be. I wanted to speak for those. I know time is against us. I want to stop here, Steve. Can you talk about the note? Thank you.
Now it's my turn to obey. Okay. So I did want to say a word, Sam, about the co-chair's action note. So the action note will be on the website, and it talks about 3 things that are coming out of the conversation today. And they're very much aligned, I think, with the bulk of the conversation we'd have. The first part of the action note for 2026 is the guide update. So the Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action are updating their guide, which is their flagship guide for finance ministers, and it will include nature as well as climate. So this is a big update. It will be launched at the annual meetings of the World Bank, IMF in Bangkok later this year. UNEP is working on it. Many others are working on it, London School of Economics and others. We've had a request today to also include pollution as part of the update. So Sam has heard that, and I think we're going to be thinking about that. The second pillar is the Makeri Page Capacities platform, which will support finance ministers in Africa with their own capabilities program. So this, again, with Sam's leadership, with LSE, the Grantham School, will be rolling out, and it will be announced at the regional meeting of the Coalition of Finance Ministers next week, is it, Sam? Or? Yeah.
Yes, Stephen, you've touched my heart. Yes, we are having that, and the platform for African Ministers of Finance will be launched in Lusaka on the 18th, and it's going to bring us as ministers of finance and ministers to start thinking more about what we should be doing. Like I put in my remarks, really, what are we doing ourselves, and how can we get our brothers and sisters to come and work with us, get it going with our local solutions and what we want to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Okay, and then the third one is bringing our forces together, which was always the spirit of Page, that we can do more together than any one of us can do on our own. And so parts that are coming together, there's something called the Net Zero Nature Positive Accelerator. It's a $100 million JEF program that was launched by UNEP and many partners, the Asian Development Bank, Cooperación Andino de Fomento in South America, and also another program called IKI Fast, which is basically sustainable finance supported by the Ministry of Environment in Germany. So we're very grateful for those things. And of course, Page will continue to be part of the solution, that connectivity that brings people together. And we're so pleased for our relationship with the coalition. With that, a big round of applause for our panelists, please. And please let me invite Director Sheila Agarwal-Khan to the stage, and she can give her closing remarks. Sheila.
Thank you, everyone. So sorry I was late because I was in an event on mobility, and it was very interesting to hear the fiscal policy discussions in there. So because the participants were talking about, well, you know, right now you see e-mobility everywhere, right? Wherever you are in the world, there are either electric buses or a handful of cars or motorbikes, but not at scale necessarily. So different countries at different spaces. And so they talked about scaling requiring investment, but then investment requiring the right fiscal policy environment. So it was very interesting to walk in here and then hear you all talk about resilience and the question, Ilka, that you raised, which was what different economies think of. Is environment central to economies? Is it hurting economies or is it supporting economies? And that's the big question in the room, right? And then you talked about, Christina, about Brazil saying, well, actually, resilience is central to economies, and how Brazil has an Indonesia and all, and how are the countries moving towards having more resilient economies, because at the end of the day, I think Sam had mentioned also with us earlier today that, well, if you have climate change and your agriculture is at stake, either like in Kenya now, where we're going into a drought because our rains have failed here. Well, so what's going to happen to the economy? Because, you know, you're going to have to import food, you're going to have, you know, more poverty. And so actually you have a situation where climate change is going to make us more vulnerable as a society, and the economy is going to pay the price, including in the different industry sectors, whether it's agriculture or any other sector that an economy can depend upon. And so in the discussion, what was very interesting was to seeing how, as you said, how does resilience become then very important for prosperity and for competitiveness? And we've seen that in many different processes, right? Because they're not isolated spaces. They're unbelievably connected, and sometimes it's the elephant in the room. Everybody's talking about something, but actually finance and economy are at the center of it. So it was very interesting to hear how some of the support you've taken on in your own countries, how in Indonesia, you've looked at how to connect planning and budgeting and the fiscal thinking and the investment into something much more coherent where they align better together. And so where the taxonomy space allows different actors across very different sectors to speak to the same language. There was a question about rules of engagement. And well, this is a support to the rules for engagement, because how can you be speaking about rules for engagement if you don't have a similar language and taxonomy that you're speaking to? And then, of course, there was the capability and the support, and as Stephen mentioned, the Page Makerere support, and the Blavatnik Hub, which is providing support to countries who are really interested in moving in this space. How many we said? 101 countries in the Coalition for Finance Ministers, really trying to connect finance and environment. And as many of you spoke about, the issue of public procurement. And what does it mean to have public procurement that really pushes the markets, so that you can at least start the markets moving in a certain space, and then investment will unlock. So thank you very much.
Thanks everyone for joining us. I hope you've had a good conversation. It's been a really great conversation. Thanks again to our panelists for joining today. Thank you.